Right, Myles Berrio. What's going on, my man?
What's going on? How are you, brother?
Doing good, doing good. You have a very powerful story. You're killing it in real estate. You're killing it in your health. You're killing it with your family. The guy is shredded. The guy's healthy. The guy's a family man. This is all important and it's all great things to be. But you had to overcome some freaking adversity to make it even more impressive that you are where you are today. And I think that part of your story is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than the part of your real estate investing. So if you want, man, I'll let you take the drivers because I really want to take a peek behind the curtain of who are you before we get into the numbers. Let's get it, brother.
Yeah, I didn't come from much. My mom and dad, they've never owned anything, let alone their car. So I just never really grew up in wealth, ownership, anything like that. I'm from Panama, Central America. My dad is Hispanic, barely speaks English. My mom's from Montego Bay, Jamaica. So I came to the United States and had this conversation with someone before about, let's talk about mindset, right? There's this story that there's these two brothers that had a father who was a drunk and very aggressive. And one of the brothers was like super mega successful, and the other one was like drunk and aggressive, right? And they both get interviewed because the really successful one gets interviewed and they end up interviewing the other brother. And they just say, what would you attribute to your success? How did you become who you are today? And he goes, my dad was a drunk. Dude, he was a drunk. He was aggressive. He was, what do you expect? There was no way I was going to be like that. I just ran as far, as fast, the opposite direction. And then they interview the brother and they ask the exact same question. What happened? What do you feel like attributed to where you are today? And he goes, what do you expect? Like, my dad was a drunk and super aggressive. So anyway, the reality is it's never about what happens to you in life. It's what you do with what happens to you. The story isn't as unique in terms of the fact that we all go through struggles, we all go through challenges. Yeah, we hear these things all the time. I didn't come from much. My parents struggled financially, all that stuff. So it's really just what you do with that. And for me, I don't know necessarily. I'm still trying to figure out why specifically I decided to be the other brother, where I just ran as fast as way the other direction rather than falling in the same footsteps. Because it's very easy. You only know what you know, right? So if your parents are doing a certain thing and they have a certain mindset, generally that's like the mindset and what you have. But I don't know. I think there was something in me that wanted more out of life. And I do believe all of us have a calling. And I think for me, it just allowed me to listen. And hearing that and knowing that there's a calling over my life, I just didn't accept mediocre.
I gotta stop you there real quick, brother,
Okay.
because just because that story resonated with me, what you just said, because that's exactly how me and my little brother are. And
Oh, wow.
it's yeah, so it's caused a huge gap. It's caused a gap in the family because I was the one that I saw my father and I was like, okay, he's not around his kids. He's a workaholic. He doesn't care about any of this. He's not there at the basketball practice. He's not there taking me to games. Like, it's my mom. My mom's doing everything. And so, like, for me, when I was on my journey of financial freedom, the reason I want to do it is for when I have my kids, I want to be able to be there for every single ball game and like for every dance recital. If I have girls, that's a really key thing for me. And so I love that you said that because that's exactly how I am. I'm like, I see that guy. I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. He's a perfect role model for what not to be. Whereas my brother uses it as almost like an excuse and a crutch to where he's like, oh, dad messed us up. So this is me. Yeah, that
Yeah,
hit
no,
home,
man.
man.
Yeah, and I always say it's important because even with my own kids, like the idea is not what you leave your kids, it's what you leave in them. And you can provide a roof over a kid's head, you can provide toys, games, clothes, and all these things. But what are you really leaving in them? And my parents are amazing individuals, so I'm not necessarily talking down on them in a condescending way. It's just the way they live their life in terms of what they thought would create a life of freedom. To me, didn't really seem like a life of freedom. Most people think if I work a job and make enough money, like at least I'm not out on the streets or I'm not struggling financially. And if they want more money, they just go work another job, which ties up more time. So it doesn't
Yeah.
really matter about the amount of money. You really still don't have a life of freedom because you're trading your time for money. And that's what I took from that. I wanted to run away from as fast as possible. Is like you said, at least my mom was able to come to things here and there. But yeah, even for me, a lot of times I remember I would go home with a friend of mine or something because both of my parents were working, right? They had to both work jobs where they weren't available. And if anyone follows me on social media, you guys all know I'm like at all my kids. It's a blessing because I that vision of mine, I really turn into reality. So I know I get a lot of people hit me up about me posting my daughter at her dance recital because she's 2 years old and I'm like the only father in the room.
I
While
love
it's
it,
like
man. I
7,
noticed.
8 other moms. Yeah. And I'm at her dance classes and I've not missed one and I won't. Even I was at my daughter and my son's like fashion show. And this is still a work day. It's Friday. You might leave early a little bit at work, but the fashion show was at like 11 o'clock this morning. And it's just a blessing to be able to just say, hey, you live life on my own terms. If I want to be at their show or if I want to be at the game or if I want to be at my son's swim class, I'm just there. I'm just always there and I can make that decision. So it's been really great to have that. But a little bit before real estate, before we dive into that, like you said, I actually had done a number of old avenues. You may or may not have heard of Vima, but I was approached by Vima while I was at UGA, University of Georgia in Athens, and it had never really taken off in the South. It was really huge out in the West Coast. And just to make a very long story short, I got started in Vima with him, not to be boastful, but I just blew this thing up. And the reason I didn't really finish college, because I was on planes every other weekend, just traveling, speaking at different events and whatnot, growing the company. So it's a network marketing company. Vima stands for vitamins, essential minerals, mangosteen, and aloe vera. I did really well with that. And that was my first exposure to entrepreneurship because I was training teams, I was running sales. I had to really understand how to cast a vision and get people excited about having a better life, even for themselves. And so that had to start within. How can you really teach someone something you don't know? How can you help someone go somewhere you've never been, right? So I had to learn how to become an empowering person myself. I had the whole company car. I'm like 22, 21, driving a Mercedes. And we all know you can have all the things, right? A mansion, the cars, the travel, all the different things, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be happier.
You become
There's
used to
another
it.
aspect. Yeah, that. And then at the end of the day, you just start to realize that this sort of motion that you thought that this item would provide you, you realize that this item is really just still an item. And that emotion doesn't come from an object, but it really comes from perspective, how you perceive things, right? And if you just buy another watch or buy a pair of shoes, even if it's expensive, at the end of the day, those shoes wear out, the car depreciates, all these things disappear. So you gotta have a foundation that's not gonna just really disappear over time. And a lot of that comes from obviously things like our family, how we want to impact people, things that just continue on as long as we're alive and it don't necessarily like disintegrate like a pair of shoes would over time. So anyway, it was a great learning experience because that's where I learned mindset. So all the people that you might know today, Jim Rohn, John C. Maxwell, Darren Hardy, Les Brown, T. Harv Eker, Robert Kiyosaki, everybody. That was like the first book that I read, Rich Dad, Poor
Rich
Dad.
Dad, Poor Dad. Yeah.
And it just rocked my mind, man, and my world about how to go about life. So I took that with a couple of other businesses, did okay with some of the other ones. But the one that was really awesome right before real estate, I was a wedding and commercial photographer. So again, it's never about the thing, right? I always say it's never the horse, it's the jockey. So when you have a solid mindset, it doesn't really matter what you do. You're always going to do really well. So a lot of people know me from just different commercial brands that I worked with. I've traveled all over the world, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Canada, DR, Mexico, go on and on. I was a commercial photographer for Netflix. So a lot of people know me from Love is Blind. I was a photographer for Netflix on that show. Just a lot of really awesome, really cool experiences. But long story short, I came to Greenville and COVID happened and everything shut down and disappeared. No one was meeting up and taking photos and doing things. And that was the transition in real estate.
I love it, man, because what I tell people is you want to try your hand as many things as possible in the very beginning, right? Because what you're doing is it's not necessarily marrying these vehicles to wealth. I tell people that you want to get a really clear idea about what your end destination looks like, but what's more important is the process of building skills along the way. So you are building skills and you are becoming a new and improved version of yourself with each and every failure that you had along your journey. Walk us through your real estate and the rest of your story, brother.
When I first got started in real estate, it was really through a YouTube video, man. It was wholesaling. Honestly, I watched this random YouTube video on wholesaling real estate. And it's crazy. Like I said, I've been in a lot of different businesses, t-shirt business, food truck business, photography, marketing consulting, network, all these different entrepreneurial avenues. And it's so wild. I like never knew about wholesaling real estate, even though I experienced wholesaling in other businesses. I just never thought you could do that with a real estate, a property. You could literally wholesale a house. Yeah. So when I found that out, I was like, oh, dude, come on. I spent about a month just studying it like crazy, watching every video I could, all the guys we know today, and just like watching videos. And then after that, I just said, all right, man, I'm hit the ground running. And February is when I started doing marketing and trying to do all the different things, right? Driving for dollars, sending out mailers, text messaging, and things like that. It took me about 3.5 months to get my first deal. So it was like April-ish when I got my first deal. And it ended up being two of the same checks, two different deals, but I ended up being able to close both of them the same month. And I still have all these photos. I document my journey as much as possible just to show people, like, if I can do this, anyone else could do this. They were both $11,000 deals. Stuff that we do today, obviously, it could be way bigger than that. But at that time, but to do over 20 grand, that was just obviously from what I had done before. And just to do 20 grand in a day, essentially, I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, if I could do that 2 times a month, 3 times a month, 4 times, really try to blow this thing up. I did about 6 figures in 6 months. That was my whole thing. And I was on the Flip Man's podcast and show, and I was starting to kind of name for myself. And I'm like connecting with all the other guys that we know today, deals and working with people. But life took a turn after about 6-7 months of clearing about 6 figures and just doing well and having time freedom and doing all this stuff from your computer. I got hit by a drunk driver coming home from the gym. So that just totally changed everything, right? This lady was going 91 miles per hour and intoxicated and essentially just hit my car head on at full speed, 91 miles per hour, and almost just died. Literally just, my wife almost just became a widow and I almost literally died that night, minutes away. And the only way to save my life was to amputate some limbs. They had to take my leg off. And so I got my leg amputated on my left side through the knee. I broke almost every bone in my body, is what they've said. Every limb that I had what's called compartment syndrome. So if you go through my Instagram, you'll see again, I document everything I can, even like this, right? Every limb was wrapped up. So I had a cast on every limb. Basically my leg bent backwards into the left. And so they had to amputate that because all the muscles died and everything. So they just had to take it away. My left arm, some people can see, some people don't, just because of kind of photos and angles and stuff. You don't always see it, but my left arm is completely not functional at all. So I can't really bend it at all. It's actually kind of slightly twisted. And a lot of people, if they see it, they think I'm like a burn victim because there's tons of skin graft all over. So I can't move my fingers at all. And then my right foot, not everyone realizes that either because it's not as easy to see my prosthetic on my left leg. But sometimes if you look hard enough, you'll see I have this brace around my foot on my right foot. So I have what's called foot drop. So my foot doesn't, like, I can't lift my foot up and walk like most people can. So I have a brace that goes through my shoe around my leg that keeps the foot up. And yeah, essentially the only okay part of my body is my right arm, essentially. But yeah, man. So that was a whole journey in itself, man. Just having a feeding tube, learning how to walk, talk, just everything again, dude, for the next 6 months, half a year or more, about 6-7 months, just learning how to relive life. So that obviously will knock you out again when you're trying to do deals.
Yeah. Yeah, to say the least. That's a heck of a Tuesday, man.
Yeah,
just knocked out. God, man. The part about all of this is the mindset that you had already built before this. Because think about if you hadn't have done any of the work you had done or had any of the exposure before, how much more difficult it may have been.
And it's so funny. Yeah, it's funny you say that. I tell people this all the time. It's not like when people need to lose weight and it's affecting their heart and maybe they have some sort of cardiac, whatever, just some sort of heart issue or something happens health-wise and they end up having to get rushed to the hospital. And then all of a sudden they change their diet and they leave health, they start living a healthier life, all this stuff. I always tell people you don't need to wait for the ambulance to be able to see the value of your life and to make things a priority, like your mindset. A lot of times people just, for whatever reason, it's like insurance. You think you don't need it until you need it, right? So you don't want to have a very reactive way of life. You want to be preventative, right? That's why we have two different types of health, right? They say like preventative health. So there's things you can do to prevent things, but then we got to take medicine and take pills and take things because something already happened. So you don't want to have to wait till you're in the hospital. You want to take preventative measures. And the way to do that, to help prevent some of these very catastrophic, detrimental mindsets and basically going down the wrong way, situations happening, is just working on your mindset before those things happen. And I don't want to say everyone's going to go through like getting hit by a drunk driver and almost dying and having their leg amputated and things like that. But the reality is you're either coming out of a storm, in the middle of a storm, or about to go into a storm. That's really just how life works.
Always.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you will go through some kind of challenge. It's just, there's no one on planet Earth who was born, started at 0 years old, born and went all the way to maybe 60, 70, 80 years old and just had not one challenge ever. It just obviously doesn't even make sense. You're going to go through challenges. Right? So if you know you're going to go through challenges, life is good when life is good, right? And we just forget that there's seasons to life. So Jim Rohn would talk about this all the time too, right? Like, during the summer, he talks about ants and how ants work, how they prepare for the winter, right? Store food right? Instead of waiting to try and get food during the winter. When the summertime's around, if you just eat up everything, you don't have anything stored, then when winter comes around, you're going to be SOL, right? So it's like, how can you obviously think about what's to come? And it doesn't mean you have to live your life in a negative, dreary kind of way, but you got to work on your mindset and your attitude, because life will happen and you just got to be prepared. So it's interesting you say that, because yeah, I mean, it was, I don't know, maybe a decade of just crazy personal development. And that definitely helped a lot being able to get through this situation for sure.
How have your views on life changed since that happening? Because I had a personal friend that it was a similar situation, but he didn't make it out. He was just a guy that was like crushing it. He's probably 27, 28 as well. And he was just murdering it. He was at the top of his game. Like, he was just one of those dudes that was just living life and just jet setting. And then he was in Buckhead, North Atlanta one night, bam, drunk driver, gone. And so ever since that moment for me, I've really viewed things a lot differently with the way that I view each and every day, the way that I view time horizons. It's like, the way that I view it is, I'm fine with being patient for the results, but I want to be impatient with my actions, is how I view it. I'm curious about your perspective shifts after having something like that happen.
I think at the end of the day, it's important for us to strive to be great. And I think the challenge sometimes is so much of our life is just focused around what our success looks like in business, right? But we then tend to leave out and forget that you might be great at putting another dollar in the bank, but how much have you deposited in your marriage? How much have you deposited in your health? How much have you deposited with your kids? So to be quite honest, like, that accident didn't make me actually grind harder or go like, life's short, so I need to just crush it and go crazy. Well, they say the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So prioritizing is so important. So yeah, people see me in business and I'm doing what I can. Like I said, everyone has different levels. So I don't want to be like, oh, I'm crushing it. Is all relative, right? To one person, it may not be as great. So I just think I'm doing as much as I need to do and as well as I can in business. But I also translate that in my marriage. Like, I deposit and invest so much into my marriage. I deposit and I invest so much into my kids, because when something like that happens, you realize I could literally disappear today. My wife could be gone today. Literally, we have no idea. Your kids, we just always assume nothing. We have this cute little family, or maybe I'm single and I'm just, I have all these goals, these things. There's no way I could just die tomorrow or die today. We just assume we're always going to be around. It's just so not true. And that accident, it really did put in perspective. Like, even me, Myles, not to be boastful, but dude, I don't even drink. I don't even like drinking. And to someone who is like very personally developed, on top of his game, very faithful to his marriage, works out, in shape, loves God, all the things you could check off to be like, I'm the perfect guy or whatever. But I could have just died. I literally could just die. Like, it never matters. None of that ever matters. How cute you look, how pretty you are, how much money you're making. How are you prioritizing your life in general? And a lot of times we sacrifice things that shouldn't be sacrificed for things at the end of the day that won't give us as much as we think it will. And so anyway, like, that's for me, that accident, it did less about money and business for me than it did just the overall perspective of life. I want my children to remember me in a certain way, and my wife to obviously feel a certain way. I don't need to have this stage presence with business that's going to give me my success. I really understand how short life can be. So I want to make sure that if anything ever happened, either the people that I would be leaving that love me the most, they feel a certain way. It's not a negative or bad, or, oh, I wish dad would do this, or I wish my husband this. You work just as hard as you do in your business, in your marriage, in your family, in relationships with people, how you serve and love others, and just a community. All those things are important too.
Man, preach, brother. Preach to him. I love
Good.
this, man. I'm a man of faith as well, and wholeheartedly believe that you were put and you were given this second chance to do something great. Curious, outside of your marriage, outside of your family, which of course, like, we're not even going to talk about the real estate. Screw the real estate. Like, I've got plenty of real estate on here, but like, we don't have this perspective. This is why you listen to podcasts. This is why you go to mastermind events. This is why you get coaching. All of it really is, when you boil it down, it's just perspective that you didn't have. You're just borrowing it from other people. So I'm curious, outside of your family and outside of your marriage, what purpose do you think that you are brought back here to fill in this world? Because I think it's going to be a big one, man. Like I could just feel it from you.
Yeah. It's funny. And again, everyone has their own opinion about it, and it's totally fine. But I actually think, I'll just say this as a man of God, a man of faith, like I believe at the end of the day, if you're a Christian, if you're a believer in Christ, and I know not everyone is, I'm just saying this is my perspective as a believer, that actually our purpose is all the same. Our purpose is to, as it says in scripture, whatever you do, do to your best ability and do for the Lord. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter the vehicle, it all needs to point to Christ. So I believe my purpose is the same as all of our purposes, which is really to show people the love of Christ and to show people a level of forgiveness and love that you cannot find anywhere else. That's why as a father, as a mother, as a friend, we always fail. We can never be perfect, right? And even my accident, right? I have never felt negatively towards that lady. Oh my gosh. Are you kidding me, Myles? How? That doesn't make sense. Think about it. At the end of the day, did this lady wake up out of bed and said, I'm going to drink alcohol and smash in Myles's car so all of this stuff can happen and he loses his leg and all this craziness? Dude, she didn't even know me. Of course, it was a mistake. It was a mistake. Now, have I ever put anyone in the hospital? I have their leg amputated and all these things? Oh, but come on. At the end of the day, have we not all made mistakes, no matter at what level? Would you have wanted your mistake to be forgiven? Or would you have wanted that person to hold that over you and not be able to forgive you? And at the end of the day, we all want forgiveness. Any mistakes that we make that aren't intentional, we want to have forgiveness for it. But that comes from a scriptural mindset. So when that happened, there was so much relief and there was so much freedom in me being able to go and live the life that I wanted to live, because I wasn't holding on to this sort of animosity or this sort of emotion that would have really kept me in captivity, rather than allowing me to be free as great as I can be. A normal, just worldly mindset, anybody would have totally validated me angry. And I would have had every person in their right mind validate me being upset, angry, and all these different things. It's actually what really converted my brother, who essentially has been an atheist for I don't know how many years. My response to this accident, because he was so angry. I'm like his little brother. So of course, he was angry. This is what it means to be a believer, man, and how you can serve and love people no matter what. And anyway, going back to what I'm saying is, like, that's what my purpose is, to show people the love of Christ, because I know it will literally absolutely create a better life for them than just following the world. So I do that in my business. So here's an example. So the short-term rental that I just bought, which, by the way, for zero interest, zero down. I love creative finance, so we can talk into some of this stuff. Anyway, so this is a short-term rental. One of the things that I'm doing, so I have this whole thing called Songs of B&B. So it's kind of like this little ministry that I'm doing through our short-term rentals, to where every month, one day out of the month, we shut it down and we open it up for a house of worship, for a house of prayer, for a house of healing. People that can come in, like literally think about it. You own these buildings, you own these houses. Can you allow your actual buildings and assets to be a resource to literally have people's lives change and to have healing and have prayer? Even in the short-term rentals, again, some people can see that on social media, I have these prayer walls, right? Like basically any guests that come through can essentially, before they leave, write a prayer on the wall. Because when we have these Songs of B&B, we shut it down for a day. We have worship night and prayer, and people come in and whatnot. We literally have people's names and prayers that we can pray over, and we can all do these things, right? But sometimes we just don't choose to, because it's not a priority, or we're just focused on the money, and we say that we want to impact people and all these things, but really just want to be big and make a lot of money and do all these great things. But dude, how are you like actually serving and loving on people and utilizing the assets you have to really? You don't need another 20 units to do that, dude. What I just talked about, that I could just say that one short-term rental right there could just be so impactful. That one house, right? So we don't need another 50 units, another 100 units, another 2,000 units to start doing these things. So I would just encourage people to really think about, how can you leverage the assets that you already have? We're already so much wealthier than we think. We just keep looking to the guy that's running fast next to us, thinking we're running slower and that we need to run faster. But dude, I run at my own pace. I don't need to try and be like any other body. Like, I'm trying to focus on impacting people and serving and loving and pointing back to Christ, because that's how I know I'm alive, dude. I just thank God every day that I'm here with my family and with my kids, start really impacting people in a serious way with what we already have.
Dude, I'm fired up. I'm ready to go. I'm on fire, man. All right. Yeah. So screw the real estate. This isn't even a real estate show today. This is just, ladies and gentlemen listening, if you've made it to this point, I feel bad for the people that you're running into today, because they're going to be like, what drugs is this person on? They're going to be crazy, man. Oh man, I love this. I love this, man. This has been awesome perspective. Yeah, I want to cap it there just to be able to just sit with this story and sit with this gospel that you're preaching and be able to have that perspective, man, because there's two different things, right? There's the stories that are told, but what's equally as important is the person that's telling the story.
Yeah.
So that's what provides the context. Like I can come and tell a story about freedom because I went and did it and I went through it and I've accomplished it. And you can come and tell this story of forgiveness and love unconditionally, of priorities, of like fulfillment, of true fulfillment and purpose and passion because you went through the storm, you went through it. So you can offer it at a level that's higher than somebody that may be coming on and they say, oh yeah, I'm a unit 9,000. I can't wait to get to unit 10,000. Like the marginal utility of money is completely gone for them. Right. So where can people find you and follow you along for the rest of this journey, man?
Yeah, man. Again, seriously, Brian, I just appreciate you even just having me on, dude. I love just connecting with other mind individuals and impacting others. I really appreciate that. If anyone wants to connect with me, I'm pretty accessible all over. I document my journey. I'm all over social media. If you just type in my name, Myles Berrio, YLESMYLES, and .Berrio, BERIO on Instagram. That kind of connects me to everything. Or if you just go to my website, which is just Myles Berrio Go, so GO.com, you could pretty much find every way to connect with me through there. MylesBerrioGo.com.
Love it, man. Love it. Appreciate you. Thank you for coming on, man. And keep being you, brother. Love it.
Dude,
It's radiating.
Likewise.
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Myles Berrio, Brian Lubin with the Action Academy podcast, signing off.